This video is brought to you by Squarespace. From custom domains to beautiful websites using their easily customizable templates that you can have up and running in minutes, e-commerce, email and email marketing, SEO, analytics, and scheduling, Squarespace does it all and has done it for us for the last 6 years. If you are a small to mid-sized business in any industry, Squarespace is the place to go for all of your website needs. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/Hugh for a free trial. And if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code Hugh at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. People keep asking me, why black and white photography? Here's why. Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant, and today I want to share with you why I love black and white photography. It's a very subjective thing, of course, but I hope what I share with you can serve to sharpen your own sense of why you like what you do, or at the very least offer you a modicum of entertainment. The simple fact, first and foremost, is this: I grew up with black and white photography, though I find it fascinating that the very first image that captivated me and launched my lifelong passion for photography was a brilliantly crisp color Kodachrome slide of a piece of driftwood at water's edge. It's equally fascinating to me to realize that other than this one image, when I see color photographs, I instinctively convert them in my mind's eye to black and white, which just might mean I'm less evolved than the average Homo sapiens, because evolutionary biologists tell us that rods and cones, the two types of photoreceptors in our eyes, what we might think of as black and white and color vision respectively, developed sequentially, with rods arriving first. Now, whether or not I'm developmentally stunted, it's also fascinating to learn that mammals' first need for vision was as nocturnal creatures, that is, active at night, in an era when they'd otherwise pretty much be lunch meat for the dinosaurs dominant at the time. Rods are more sensitive to light and therefore much more useful at night, when differences in color are hard to detect in any case, at least the visible light spectrum as we know it, when light, shadow, shape, distance, size, juxtaposition, and movement, maybe geometry too, one can argue, vectoring, are all critical in determining what you can and cannot eat and what can or cannot eat you. Cones, that is again color vision, are very poor photoreceptors in low light and became an evolutionary advantage only after the extinction of dinosaurs made diurnal activity feasible. To my way of thinking at that point, color vision became extremely useful in a binary kind of way too. What to eat, what not to eat, what to fight, what not to fight, when to hide, when not to hide, what not to. I encourage you to check out Life in Color with David Attenborough on Netflix to learn more about this. I mention evolutionary biology in this context because I'm struck by two other things. First, the binary choices for which color offered an evolutionary advantage just don't interest me very much. Never have. Not because they aren't important, though too often too many of us don't get even these things consistently right, but because over the course of tens of thousands of years, our collective ability as a species to more finely delineate the mix of attributes we find attractive or repulsive in any number of scenarios has evolved dramatically, as has our ability to simultaneously process and hold approach and avoidance instincts at the same time. I mean, how else to explain caviar? As for myself, I've got the basics of color down. Green, go. Red, stop. I got it. Blue, my kind of color. What can I say? I like water, sky, blueberries. I'm okay with my own eye color. Yellow, orange, and red, in moderation, good. Bell peppers, tomatoes, bananas, oranges, strawberries, raspberries. Fire, good. As long as I don't get too close, then really, really bad. Green, good. Except for poison ivy, poison sumac nettles, stuff like that. Black and red, cool on car seats, not so cool on spiders and snakes. Second, I realized that the words I just used to describe what black and white vision was used for, still used for, I suppose, for any species active in the dark today, are the very same words I use when I describe a good chunk of what fascinates me about the photographic opportunities in street photography, along with two other words I use regularly when talking about New York City in particular: texture and tonality. Hunting on the streets of New York. As for growing up with black and white, I was born in the middle of the last century. I just said that out loud. It's not that color photography didn't exist back then, though the first photograph I recall ever seeing was this one, a black and white photo of my father with, baby Huey, taken by my mother in 1957. It is extraordinary how every time I look at this image across more than 6 decades, I'm immediately transported to utter calm, serenity, and security. In this instance, the black and white image distills the essence of it for me, no color to distract me from or dilute its meaning. The newspapers back then were all black and white too. In fact, the New York Times, the Gray Lady, which we got every Sunday in print, published its first photograph in 1896, but didn't publish its first color photograph until 1997, when I was already 40 years old. I am keenly aware that my earliest extended engagement with color photography was courtesy of the covers of the back issues of Vogue magazine my mother kept, dating to the 1950s, that I thumbed through as a little boy. I think, maybe, those issues of Vogue, where I first discovered and was transfixed by the images of Avedon and Penn, were also where I began to convert color images to black and white in my mind's eye. I didn't enjoy the color images of the covers as much. They seemed washed out to me in comparison to the Kodachrome slide that got me started. And I didn't care about fashion, fabrics, shades of lipstick, color theory. I mean, look, we're talking about a 6, 7, 8-year-old kid more into building blocks, Legos, and erector sets. But there was something, even in those images, the precision, the shapes, the juxtapositions, riveting to me. Just as formative, the children's books of Dr. Seuss and Charles M. Schulz. Simple shapes, juxtapositions, intimations of movement, and stories. Other than their covers, all of the imagery was black and white, though inside Dr. Seuss's The Cat in the Hat there was color, if little more than red and blue accents. The pages themselves were white, the text was black. Call Cat in the Hat my first exposure, no pun intended, to negative space. The irony, like that first Kodachrome slide, was that it was all the more revelatory when I first saw M. Sassock's colorful Peons of Cities, his children's book, This is New York, which I love to this day. Though with these eyes, rather than the eyes of the little boy I was, I see how Sassock knitted together black and white and color, and shapes, sizes, juxtapositions, paradox, and intimations of movement in an exceptional way. He used all of these things to make New York even more New York to me, somehow even more real to my 6-year-old self. His work rekindles my sense of childlike wonder. TV played a role, too, in forming my black and white sensibilities. How could it not? We grew up with a black and white TV set, and that meant black and white cartoons, shows, movies, and news. You want a snapshot of a certain piece of mid-century America, the kind of stuff that bombarded a first grader in New York back in the day? A bombardment of shapes, textures, juxtapositions, movement, sound, stories, and emotions with no need for color because we never saw the color. Let me at least rattle off a pile of influences and encourage you to learn more about these things on your own. Diver Dan, Fireball XL5, Courageous Cat and Minute Mouse, Astro Boy, and Gigantor. Superman, My Three Sons, Mayberry RFD, Leave It to Beaver. Frankenstein, Wolfman, Dracula, and Mummy films from the 1930s and 40s. Laurel and Hardy, The Three Stooges, Abbott and Costello, The Addams Family, The Munsters. Gilligan's Island. I Dream of Jeannie. Don't get me started. Man from U.N.C.L.E., Mission Impossible, Star Trek, which was filmed in color, but as I said, we only had a black and white set. Casablanca, my all-time favorite. Gentleman's Agreement, Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House, It's a Wonderful Life, The Wizard of Oz. These were all shown on TV over the air for free. Though I didn't find out most of The Wizard of Oz was shot in color until I was much older. Didn't matter to me at all. News of Kennedy's assassination, King's assassination, Bobby Kennedy's assassination, landing on the moon. And in elementary school, during social studies lessons, footage of the liberation of the concentration camps in Europe at the end of World War II. The Time Life book series on photography, I received one per month in the mail over the course of 1970 and 71, just as I entered junior high school, were almost exclusively in black and white, save actually for the one book entitled Color. I learned more from that one set of books, delivered infrequently enough so that I took the time to read each one cover to cover, than I would any other source. And, more than any other source, it informed my sensibilities. Black and white, I absorbed, was serious, important, worthy. From Matthew Brady to Jacob Riis, Dorothea Lange, Margaret Bourke-White, Cartier-Bresson, Robert Capa, Walker Evans, Edward Steichen, Ansel Adams, W. Eugene Smith, Gordon Parks, and so many more. The subject matter the best photographers covered was important. Their work was disciplined, technical, impactful, at their very best, beautiful, inspiring, chilling, heartbreaking, thought-provoking. In the meantime, I was also learning, rightly or wrongly, that color photography was none of those things. As a little boy growing up in the 60s and then as a young man in the 70s, I experienced color photography as relegated to advertisements and fashion. But ethylene, Taki, eventually I did learn my lesson, you know that. And closer to home, as abysmally pedestrian snapshots created by the millions that only the people who took them could love, dropped off at their local camera stores or pharmacies for processing. I experienced this firsthand in my first job at the age of 14, working at our local camera shop. I also experienced how little control I had over my own final images as long as I had to send them out for processing, which is why I learned how to develop film and print on my own, setting up my first darkroom at the age of 12 in our bathroom. But there were also two profoundly mundane reasons why I shot, developed, and printed in black and white. 1. Color was too expensive and complicated for me in my darkroom, with little to negative return over black and white as far as I was concerned. And 2, color films were too slow for me, with too lengthy a turnaround time for the kind of instant gratification so many of us crave. Kodachrome, my favorite emulsion of all, had a film speed of just ASA 25. But then I'd have to send it in for processing, wait for it to come back, and then load the slides into the projector. I'd have to set up the projector and the screen each time I wanted to view them, put them into the carousel, then take them down and put them away. Of course, I could always pull them out of the little box they came in and hold them up to the light with a loupe, which I always did, or later on look at them on a light box, but the satisfaction was very short-lived. Instead, I chose to shoot with Tri-X at ISO 400, oh baby, 4 times faster, developing it as soon as I got home using D76, and then printing 8x10s or 11x14s with Dept the same day. Eventually, I began shooting Tri-X at 1200 and developing with AccuFine, oh yeah. With all of this said, that was a long time ago. Today, I'd share with you that given who I've become over a lifetime, black and white retains a huge head start over color as a way of seeing. Before I ever bring the camera up to my eye, it begins as an abstraction, the absence of color immediately removing it one level from real life. Which isn't to say I never liked shooting color, haven't liked shooting color in the past. Sometimes I do, and I have. But the best of those shots always involve the people I know and love. Like this one, taken of one of my daughters in Rome back in 2000 on a Canon EOS R3 35mm film camera. For my art, I experienced black and white photography, mixing my vantage points as an adult with the fond memories of my childhood, as a bit like getting a decoder ring or X-ray glasses. I see more things in black and white. I see more important things in black and white. I see deeper essences in black and white. I look for them, ergo, I find them. But here are a few nuts and bolts secrets. First, for a while, I'd even set my EVF to black and white JPEG if the camera I happened to be using didn't let me set the EVF alone. I was delighted that this was a fringe benefit I hadn't contemplated when switching to mirrorless. If you are exploring black and white photography for the first time, you might want to avail yourself of this tool to help you literally see in black and white. Second, I shoot in RAW and JPEG. JPEG for quick turnaround of black and white imagery, and RAW because I want to retain color information to preserve the options of A, using color channel mixing as a post-processing alternative to futzing with filters during capture, And B, deciding to render the image in color after all. Third, when I do consider whether or not I will create a color photograph, it is usually at the point of capture, and thus gets to a mantra of mine. The greater one's clarity around intent before tripping the shutter, the more likely one is to be successful afterwards. I ask myself as I'm viewing a scene, and then again if I'm uncertain in post, does color add to or subtract or detract from the final image? Does color support my intent or distract from it? I think this is not the first time I'm making this point. Fourth, and this is also very personal, when I shoot in black and white, it removes from my aggravation zone the cardinal sins of lateral and chromatic aberration. Chromatic aberration really annoys me. Yes, I can correct it in post, but I don't enjoy it, and it makes me unhappy about my equipment choice. It means I've invested my dollars in gear from a company that doesn't care about it as much as I do. Or it means that in my pursuit of something else, usually shallow depth of field, occasionally cost, I've allowed color to get in the way. I'm talking about even without pixel peeping. I intuit it before I actually see it. So then I look for it and find it at normal image size and viewing distances. This doesn't matter and shouldn't matter to most people, but it drives me nuts. This is why Leica's Apo-Summicron SL35, the entire Summicron SL lens catalog, speaks to me. But there are other, less expensive lenses that do as well. Hold that thought. For most of my life, color for color's sake has not interested me. For the most part, it still doesn't. The answer to the question, does color add to or subtract from what I'm trying to do, is usually subtract. But when I do choose to embrace color, as I have again more recently, it's often monochromatic color, and I instill the frame with my black and white mindset, like this. I think this new embrace is perhaps a function of three things: the pandemic, technology, and life. Maybe my conversation with Joel Meyerowitz. Let's talk for a moment about the pandemic. It feels to me, as it must to literally millions, if not billions of other people, too many others for whom it still does not, that we are once again, as a species, exiting a period of profound darkness and coming into the light. I see this looking at the trajectory of my own work over the past 12 months, not just the presence of color, but how it reinforces the emotions I experienced at the moments of capture. I see it in my newfound appreciation, most especially for the color photography of Ernst Haas, who came to New York City from Europe after another great period of darkness, World War II, and embraced the light and color of the New World. I experience it in my better understanding and appreciation of Martin Parr's work. And quite apart from all of that, I feel it personally in the greening that spring brings to the previously barren trees and brown dormant lawns. I feel it in the blossoming flowers of our yard. I feel it as the winds send brilliant white clouds sailing across an even more brilliant blue sky. After the storm, whatever kind of storm, nature has a way of reminding us that life will be okay. Technology? Well, the technology available to us today has the advantage of half a century's worth of evolution. Before any of us takes a shot, as I mentioned earlier, we now have at our disposal sensors that can see colors in low light that the human eye often cannot. Let me dimensionalize this for you. When Ernst Haas first shot with Kodachrome in his Leica, the emulsion's speed was 8. You heard me right. 8. The single digit 8. This meant that on a bright sunny afternoon in New York in 1950, he'd have to set his shutter speed to 1/30th of a second to shoot at the set it and forget it aperture of the era f8, but if he really wanted deep depth of field, he'd have to shoot at an eighth or even a quarter of a second. Today, you or I can shoot up to ISO 50,000 handheld, if we happen to have in hand the latest sensors and IBIS, and retain dramatically more color than ever possible. Completely doable. After we framed and captured an image, we can see the impact of changes we're making to it in real time in post via dozens of parameters available to us as sliders in software like Lightroom or Capture One. We can make colors pop, change the relationships among them, even change them altogether effortlessly, exploring how to use color to heighten other kinds of contrasts or emotions we feel as the artists in our images. Alternatively, we can, if we capture an image in color but convert it to black and white, still manipulate color channels to change the dynamics of a black and white scene with much greater effect and or nuance than would be possible with black and white film or monochrome sensors and filters. As I said before, less futzing. I can tell you that this has been a wonderful and surprisingly delightful way for me to reestablish a more personal, intuitive relationship between color and real life, even as I continue to embrace the abstraction of black and white. As I showed you a few minutes ago with this image taken in Chinatown just last month. The red of this scene hit me like a ton of bricks the moment I first spied it and literally ran toward it. But the composition I imposed on the frame came straight from my black and white mindset. The really interesting thing is that almost as soon as I began to edit the images on my 27-inch display, I felt as if my retinas were burning out. I had to step away from the screen to recover. I really do wonder how much of my DNA is Homo sapiens and how much of it is something else. Once we've finalized the image we want, we can immediately print it at home, or much more often just look at it on a screen backlit, just as if I were a child all over again holding a slide up to the light, either on our computers or streamed to, in our case, a 55-inch diagonal 4K TV. Again, the cost and complexity of doing color has changed dramatically to our benefit. And of course, we can share our images instantly across the globe or pull them up wherever we are on our phones at zero marginal cost. No futzing with processing mailers, slide projectors, carousel trays, or portable screens. No need to schedule a visit and subject family members to an interminably long and boring slideshow, though I do miss the excuse for getting family together. And on smartphone displays, have you found this to be true as well? Color somehow seems to reassert itself, perhaps because it discourages pixel peeping and directs people to seeing the image as a whole, or just color is a more blunt force instrument. Finally, other than the small displays of those smartphones, lens and camera manufacturers now have computer-aided design and manufacturing along with automatic in-body software correction to minimize or eliminate chromatic aberration at larger and more serious print sizes. As I said, this is why my Leica Apo Summicron SL35 speaks to me, but it's also why my $1,200 Fujifilm XF 16-55 2.8 and now on sale for just under $500, the Nikkor Z51.8 speak to me. When I do choose to shoot color, they don't penalize me. Let's wrap it up this way. In the end, there is no inherent objectively superiority of black and white over color imagery, save, I think it fair to say, for high ISO capture. The degree to which we prefer one over the other, I think, is entirely subjective, a function of where we've been and where we're going. The reason why black and white photography works for me today is a combination of artistic sensibilities and ever fainter memories of practical realities formed while I was still a boy and reinforced along the way to and through adulthood. Maybe a retrograde genetic twist or two. And now, having done it for so long, well-established neural pathways and the simple unadulterated joy of connecting with people on the street that reassures me the world is not a uniformly terrible place. I was going to say that this last reason actually has little to do with the choice between black and white and color per se, but that's just not true for me. When I capture people in black and white on the street, my decoder ring and X-ray glasses make me feel that I'm seeing more clearly who they actually are. But someone like Steve McCurry might have a very different point of view on that. I've taken this opportunity to share with you today my own photographic journey, along with a quick dive into the annals of photography, informed by the experience and lessons top of mind after more than half a century on this mortal coil. I've shared with you some of the photographers who have inspired, some of the photographers who inspire me now but I missed along the way. And I look forward to sharing with you in the future photographers I've yet to meet who will do the same. I love this kind of stuff. Maybe we'll meet each other along the way. I'd like that. This episode was brought to you by Squarespace. For all of your website needs, Squarespace is the place to go. Hop over to www.squarespace.com/hugh for a free trial. And if you like what you see and want to move forward, receive 10% off your first order by using the discount code HUGH at checkout. Thanks, Squarespace. If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe, join the conversation below because this is an incredible audience. If you'd like a copy of our Streets of New York, the book, head over to www.3bmep.com/books. If you'd like to schedule a one-on-one video session with me for a portfolio review, explore or hone your artistic voice, select gear, and more, sign up at www.3bmep.com/booking. Finally, consider supporting our work by using our no-cost-to-you affiliate links down below, picking up some official Three Blind Men and an Elephant swag at 3bmep.threadless.com, sending coffee money via PayPal, or best of all, join us as a patron over at Patreon. However you choose to support us, as always, we thank you for it.